The bull streak has ended. It goes out the door along with Paul Bunyan's axe. What a shambolic performance from our team. We have a lot to get into today, a lot to talk about, a lot to hopefully maybe look forward to in the future. It doesn't look very good right now. I'm Rajeev. He's Justin. Here we go.
Welcome to the Bucky Report, your destination for all things Wisconsin Badgers. Authentic takes.
Oh my God.
Game analysis.
Touchdown Badgers! Ring one up!
And discussion from the fan perspective.
Woo-hoo!
Thanks for joining us and on Wisconsin.
Welcome to the Bucky Report. We are your hosts, Rajeev and Justin, back together on a Sunday to talk about all things Wisconsin Badgers. On today's sad show, the 22-year streak of the Badgers having a winning season has officially come to an end. We get into all the happenings of the program, talk about the Minnesota loss and everything that happened wrong. We have coordinators to talk about, potentially offensive coordinator decision, hopefully coming soon. Do we need a defensive coordinator? Do we not? Do we still believe in Luke Fickell? And of course, a ton of listener questions today. Also, National Signing Day is just a few days away. Justin and I will hit on that a bit and talk about some expectations we have going into that big day. We are at the Bucky Report on Twitter, YouTube, and wherever you can find your podcast. If you like what we're doing, hit the subscribe button so you know when we make new content. We also appreciate any likes you can give us. That's always helps out the channel. Justin, I know you did a call-in show with Ryan the other night. By the way, weird time today. It's Sunday morning. Yes, I know the Colts are on. I've got them on over here. It's Black Friday weekend. If you guys know, I run shopping center, so I've been at work a lot these last few days. Haven't really been, and I'm going back to work today. So that's why we're doing the show right now. So I haven't had a chance to talk about this. I know you have a little bit, but we'll open the show with you, Justin. Give me your initial takes 2 days later. Where's your head at right now about everything you saw on Friday, and frankly, everything that's been talked about in the program since then?
I think you need to completely detox the program right now. And I'm not saying it necessarily means you need to do bulk firings, but there's definitely got to be some new blood. Standards are not good enough. I think Longo was part of that issue. I think there's going to have to be some other changes that take effect here, but you need to instill some toughness into this program, and you need to get back to the basics of just like, what are the things that we can do well, that we can control? Like defensively, I don't care how exotic your scheme is, just be able to play consistent defense, like stopping the run, being able to, have guys in the right position to make plays. This defense was horrible for that this year. Like, we constantly had guys that were reactionary rather than playing downhill and active. That's something that's got to change. On offense, just be able to run the damn ball. Like, I don't care if we can be super explosive, but we've got to be able to do the little things to at least be functional. We look this entire season like there was nothing that we could do well. And, there are teams that out there, like, look at the service academies that all they can do is run, and that's fine. Their aspirations are not what our aspirations are. We need to build. So, like, if all we could do is run right now, and it was like, all right, well, we've got one building block in place, now we can start working on other things, that would be a huge step in the right direction for this program. Same thing with defense. If all we could do was stop the run, but we're not a super effective pass defense, fine. At least then we're forcing them, we're taking away the easiest thing for an offense to do, which is to run the ball well. There's a lot less risk involved with it. Maybe some good things happen on defense and pass plays then. But we're just not good at anything right now, and that needs to change. And there's a lack of toughness on this team overall. It just doesn't seem like you have guys that are selling out on play-to-play basis in order to make things happen, unless we're playing against good teams.
Oh, boy. So I was working on Friday, and I did watch the game at work, and it was horrible. I honestly, Justin, I just feel numb right now. And I really hate that. Like, we've been a high floor team for a long time. We've had a lot of success over the years, and there is a general apathy right now around the program. And when we lost that game, I was just like, guess I didn't really expect it, if I was being honest with myself. How sad is that? How sad is it that we really didn't even, if we were really true, I mean, I did expect to win the game, but was I surprised by seeing us 24-7? No, I really wasn't, because we looked like crap. It was an absolute just joke of a performance. I don't really understand why we can't get the guys to perform a little bit better. I don't understand why Fickell hasn't been able to do that. I am very critical of Fickell right now. By far the most critical I've been of him since he started the program. I still think he should stay there. We have a lot of questions. By the way, if you have questions, put them in the chat. I've started several. We're going to get to a lot of questions today because it's kind of a bit of an open forum. And I know you guys did that the other night on Locked On. We're going to do it again today. There's just so much going on right now that I just want to talk it all out because it's a disaster. Like 5-7 season. I mean, can we just put that into perspective for a second? What the heck is going on? We haven't been this bad since 2001. And even then, we weren't probably this bad. We haven't. This is, by the way, let me tell you this. This is the first year. This is the first year since 1996 that the Badgers were not ranked to start the year or ranked at any point during the year. That's how far this program has fallen. Since 1996, this team has had at least 1 week ranked, either to start or in middle of the season. How awful is that? It's just sad to talk about this right now, to see the performance in a rivalry game against PJ Fleck, a guy that nobody likes to see do anything. Here he is jumping on his team in the locker room, banging an axe against the ceiling. I wanted to throw up. And I mean, I was sick to my stomach that day, and I'm still sick to my stomach about it. I posted on the Discord this morning that 2 days later, I still feel so bad. I feel horrible. It's just, and the thing is, there's nothing that's going to provide any kind of relief for that. We are not going to play another football game until next fall. If we back our way into a bowl game, I really could give a crap about it. I just really, really upset about this. And I don't really know where to be putting my blame other than on Luke Fickell, because in my opinion,
it has to be
on him. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
See, this is where when we talk about him being a CEO coach, that I think that it's actually beneficial. Because we're not looking at his X's and O's that we're bringing into this, that you're like, can he get his ego out of the way and get somebody in there for a fresh set of eyes? It's a much easier to look at it and be like, this isn't working. I need to replace it with something that I think can function with what I have and get other coaches in who are capable of using what you have to be effective. So, yes, he needs to make some changes to himself. Like, he's got to take a look in the mirror and be like, I need to be at the forefront of this and be enforcing my standards of what's acceptable on the program. But you can look at it and say, from a coaching philosophy standpoint, you have the ability to course correct and be able to make changes that maybe some other coaches would be less comfortable with. A prime example of that would be, looking at a coach like Ferentz at Iowa, not wanting to, like, him being so locked in on what offensively he wants that they never can truly move away from it. I feel like Fickell's more adaptable in that regard and saying, like, I don't care what it is, I just want it to work. And that's kind of how I feel about him as a coach. This isn't working. Now he's got to kind of regroup and say, all right, we need to adjust and find something that we can count on moving forward. That is something that can be a identity of this program.
I mean, let's hope that actually happens. Boy, I tell you. Seth says Illinois, Indiana, Nebraska hired coaches to turn their programs around in 2 or less. But some fans are going to say that Fickell needs more time. Really? Why? Justin, what is your take on this? Does Fickell really deserve more time? I mean, honestly.
Nebraska got, what, one more win than us? Like, chill out with that a little bit. And they've been recruiting on the same level.
Nebraska, yeah.
Like, come on. Like, Illinois and Indiana, yeah, absolutely. They've figured out how to get things rolling. There's not a, like, starter kit for rebuilding your program that you just plug whoever in. It's different every time. What I will say is you have got to figure out the things that are toxic in your program right now and figure out what positives you have and build off of those things.
A comment here from Zach Bartz that I want to talk about. He says Fickell needs, and you were just talking about this, Fickell needs to stay as the program's builder CEO. Let solid coordinators be the X's and O guys. So this whole CEO discussion, like, I'm a little bit hot and cold on this. Like, I understand he's a CEO. That's what he's trying to do. I get it. But I actually disagree with this a bit. I don't want him to let the coordinators handle all the X's and O's. I
think he's still involved on the defense.
but he needs to be more involved in spreading his vision, because if he doesn't have a vision, then he shouldn't be the head coach. I know he does, and I know he wants that, but I don't really want this whole thing to just be blaming the coordinators, or the coordinators have to change. And like, he has to be more involved. He is the head coach. And this is not a company. This is not a CEO situation where you're letting everyone do those things. He is a football coach. He has to get these guys motivated. He has got to get them to play hard. He's got to get them to play well. I'm not saying I'm not buying the whole CEO thing. I just feel like it's a little bit overplayed. And like, he has to be better regardless of whether his coordinators are bad or not. Like, maybe he should have made the change after last year. Maybe that's the mistake he made after not firing Longo earlier. Like, at some point, there needs to be a little bit more culpability on him.
Well, I think he's still involved in the game planning and everything for the defense. I just think, like, look at Wisconsin's best year in program history effectively. And in terms of like what it could have been, its highest ceiling was 2011. Bielema had like zero insight to the offense on that. He was involved with the defense, but he was hands off on the offense, and he let them do their thing. That is kind of what I think this is likely to be more of. I think that he's going to, if he gets somebody that he trusts on the offensive side of the ball, he's going to let them take it and run with it. He may have some input in terms of like, hey, slow it down here. You know, maybe let's go with a run, but I don't see him like being heavy-handed with what the expectations are in terms of that. On defense, I absolutely think he's going to have input as to what he likes and dislikes. If he does not have a change happening with what we're doing on defensive right now, I have massive issues with what we're doing, because I don't expect there to be enough change in personnel next year that this crap scheme from Tressel is going to be significantly better. And he is unwilling to change. We're not going to, regardless of if the offense is significantly better, I don't think that the defense is going to be significantly better in what they're capable of doing. And that means anytime we play a good team, they're going to shove it down our throat. It may be death by 1,000 cuts, but that's what's going to happen, because we can't force them out of what they do. And eventually the defense will start folding. And that's happened to every game that was a big game for us this year.
Well, we actually, to be fair, we did play good defense against two of the best teams we played, who both happened to be playing in the Big Ten Championship.
But eventually those teams figured out how to work around our defense and make plays. And that's what happened. Like, we got up on both of those teams. Both those teams found ways to make plays, and both those teams, let's be honest, they could have scored more than what they did.
Yeah.
Like, Penn State could have put another touchdown on the board. You could have absolutely said that Oregon, if they really wanted to push it at the end of that game, rather than running clock, they could have scored more. Like, we got lucky with the way the score looked in those games, but realistically, if they wanted to take it to us and be more aggressive, they could have been more aggressive in those games.
Let's continue the Fickell discussion a little bit. One of the things that I think really isn't being talked about enough, I mean, obviously the coaching carousel is beginning to move. Obviously, Ryan Walters very deservedly got fired from Purdue a few minutes ago. The one thing about Fickell is National Signing Day is 3 days away. And unlike a lot of other programs, there haven't been a litany of decommits. Like, we look to be having a pretty solid December 4th. Now, I know there's people in the chat that are probably thinking it can't just be about recruiting. And I know we're going to talk about that, but recruiting is a massive part of it. And the fact that he hasn't lost anybody, and he just landed Carter Smith and Williams, like, I mean, that's pretty good. I think there is something to be said for what he's still doing on the recruiting trail, and not even what he's done so far. The fact that he actually isn't losing anybody right now. Not anybody. Surely someone's going to drop, but it's not like there's some mass exodus, which you will see at a time when a team goes 5-7, loses a bowl streak, looks like crap on the field, doesn't win a trophy game. Like, there's a lot of reasons to potentially look at decommits. We haven't had that, Justin. That's a pretty good sign, honestly.
No, I would agree with that. Like, there's, from a recruiting standpoint, what you're looking for me, at least personally, is you need these guys that were freshmen this year to be showing in the 2 deep next year. And some of them you need to be starters. I look at a guy like Xavier Lucas, who I'm like, all right, he's got to be a starter next year. I look at several of the offensive linemen. Regardless if some of these guys return, I think you absolutely have to look at some of the younger guys, and you have to be honest in your evaluations and say, is this guy a better player than the guy that's ahead of him? They're not true freshmen anymore. Like, I totally understand not playing guys like Haywood and Mendel and whatever when you have a baseline of what you feel like you need. I will say Haywood as a redshirt freshman, or as I think he's a true sophomore, he's going to be. He absolutely should be in play, and I think he's a lock to start. I think there's nobody ahead of him. But there are guys like Mendel, guys like Corey, and a few others, and Cubberly, who really had a strong camp. I expect them to be considered for these positions. And I don't care if Brunner returns. I don't care if you have a couple other guys that come back that are like Malman returns. If these guys are playing better in camp, I want them starting. I don't care what these other guys' aspirations are about becoming an NFL player. If you're not good enough, you're not good enough. And if that hurts your feelings, so be it. Get out. The program struggled long enough. I don't want politics. I want guys on the field. So it's the same thing with any of these other positions. You look at wide receiver, tight end, whatever. Get the best players on the field. Stop with this nonsense of we made promises or whatever. So be it. If it doesn't work out, fine. Those guys made promises that they were going to come in and be good players too. If they're playing average, then leave. I don't care anymore. That's kind of some of the stuff that happened with Tyree Walker. I'm sure he was given some guarantees. All right, well, at the end of the season, Dupree looked like the better back. And I would have liked to have seen Jones out there, or Yakimelli out there to make plays when we're begging for somebody to step up and be effective in this offense.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I expect to see that next year. It's going to be the best players on the field for sure, including the new incoming freshmen, by the way. I mean, those guys there's some of those guys hopefully see the field next year as well. Mm-hmm. I think the time for anything that Fickell has done, I mean, he's going to try to change everything. He has to. Like, this is going to be the biggest offseason in program history at this point. I mean, really, from a perspective of launching this program into a downward spiral or launching it into a recovery zone where it's actually looking like the program that we expect it to be, there is a big difference there. And I think this is a massive offseason for him. And part of that is the hires that he brings in, right? I mean, certainly looking at guys like Joe Craddock and Brennan Marion, and we're going to get into those a little bit. On the defensive side of the ball, you touched on this a little bit. Obviously, you want changes there. I've said this before, I'm not 100% out on Tressel. I think the talent is an issue, but it's not like the talent's going to get that much better next year unless the transfer portal is really that much better.
Yeah. You're not expecting all your young guys to come in and suddenly be top-level starters. Like, if at best you're expecting them to be able to maybe provide spot snaps or be average. Even the young guy, like, I look at Dylan Johnson. I have really high aspirations for what he can be by the time he leaves here. Expecting him to come in as a true sophomore and be a dominant player is expecting way too much. Like, I think that there's a chance that he could be really good this next year, but it's asking a lot for him to come out there and be like a force as a sophomore. Like that, if that's the type of guy you're talking about, then leaving after his true junior year as an NFL guy, and that could happen. But that could happen with him being very average this year and taking a leap next year.
Yeah.
Like, it would be a lot for him to be out there and be somebody we can lean on to carry it.
Badger Ron asks, should Fick try to get Ryan Walters for DC? He's been fired from Purdue. So we were talking about this just before the show started. And my perspective on this is, no, I really don't want him to get Ryan Walters. Ryan Walters was successful in Illinois. He does have a good defense, but boy, I'll tell you what, I think that he is just nuclear right now. My thing, I mean, they have had tons of decommits from Purdue. They had one of their absolute worst seasons in their entire program history. They didn't beat a single FBS team. It is absolute catastrophe in West Lafayette. And I'm from there. I have a lot of family and friends who are Purdue fans. I've talked to them a lot about this. They all wanted him out. Obviously, he's out. And that's a big deal. I don't think you touch that right now because he's lost so many guys. In the future, in a couple years, wherever he is, I mean, I'm not saying he can't be a good coach, but I don't think you take him to another Big Ten school right now. He needs to go away, maybe go down a couple levels and work his way back up, because that is a massive disaster that happened to Purdue. And I don't want our name attached to any of it anytime soon.
I think that he probably catches on somewhere as a DC. I don't know if that means he's going to be able to get his head right instantly, but I think he should concentrate on just running a defense for a couple of years again and kind of lick his wounds a little bit. I don't think Wisconsin can afford to have a guy who's trying to figure it back out and kind of find himself right now. They need somebody who's doing whatever they're doing at a high level. I don't care if that's a guy that's down at MAC level or whatever, if you have somebody who's showing some ability to step in and find a way to be productive with less, that's ideally what you would do, because Wisconsin's roster is not going to allow you to probably be super. You're not going to be able to play the type of scheme that Trussell wants to play right now, which is he wants to effectively be playing with a bunch of athletes on the field, and all his athletes are super young guys that are not ready to go out there and do it. And that's the line of scrimmage. You're not going to be able to play with all true freshmen and redshirt freshmen and be able to do that. It's not going to work. So I don't know why you bang your head against the wall and try to do that no matter what. I think you'd be far better off going back to what Leonard did with the 2-gap and then have your linebackers just play downhill. That to me makes far more sense, because I think your linebackers, that's probably their strength, is these guys see ball, hit ball, and have far less on their plate to think, and just be able to say pre-snap, this is where I'm going on this particular play, because that's their responsibility. You got to find somebody. Go ahead.
Kevin asks, is Fickell a guy who can recruit but is not good at getting talent to basically play up to the level of its talent? So the discussion, obviously, recruiting versus getting talent to play. What are your thoughts on this? This has been a question that's actually been in the chat quite a bit. I mean, do you feel like at this point we have nothing to go on that says Fickell can get these guys to play well? What we can see is the recruiting.
At
but
Cincinnati,
this
yes.
is a concern.
You have a track record at Cincinnati. Here, absolutely not so far. He's got to prove it at Wisconsin. This is a step up. I think that theoretically what he wants to do, and it may work even here, what he was doing at Cincinnati, but I think we'd all agree the learning curve is just longer in the Big Ten because teams are better. It's far easier to get a plus roster at Cincinnati over the rest of the league than it is at Wisconsin. It's just going to take you more time. You're not going to get 5 or 6 years to build a roster that's a dominant roster and then be able to go and play. They're going to be expected results before that. So he's got to figure out a way to be productive with what he's got while he's kind of building the roster up. And that's kind of what you're looking at right now. He's got to find a way to find an offense that's capable of being effective. And it doesn't have to be a world-beating offense. It's got to be an offense that can be effective against the Iowas and Minnesotas and be able to make plays on them. And then also have some upside that you can still be that effective against plus athletes against an Ohio State or a Penn State or whoever. And that means you're going to have some deception and some ability to keep it simple for your guys that they can be effective at a high level without having to do things that are unreasonable for their talent level. And it's the same thing with the defense. You have to figure out what these guys are capable of doing well and not put them in a bind where athletically you're asking too much from them.
I think at the end of the day, Fickell has one more year to show that he can turn the talent that he can bring into the program into results on the field. I know there's people that want him out now. I know there's people that want him to have 4 or 5 years at least. I'm just to the point where you have one more year. You've got to prove something in next year. Now, the schedule is brutal next year. I'm not saying it has to be an amazing record, but we all know what we watched this year. When you see it. This is not it. This season was a complete failure. There's no doubt about that. So even if it's not impressive as far as the record goes, because you have a horrible schedule, you've got to show that you can actually get better and you can compete and you can stay with teams and you're not getting run off 42-10 against bad teams. All these things have to stop. So I think he literally has one more year to make this happen in my eyes of, can you actually get results on the field now that you've got a couple classes in, bringing in a third? These types of things have to translate.
Right.
And also the transfer portal, right? We just talked about signing day a little bit, and how he hasn't lost anybody there yet. We're going to lose people in the portal. There's no doubt about that.
We already lost one. Leon Lowry to the portal. Not a loss. Having watched him play this season, he's depth fodder at best. There's not enough there from him to be a productive player. That is a guy that you're hoping your young guys, they should be better than. I expect Anelu and Lafayette and Heiberger to be better than him this next year, and I don't think he's good enough to provide depth. So I'm okay with that loss. There's going to be more guys that are going to disappear, but they need to find talent on the edge. They need to find talent in the interior.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think that, it's just so last year coming into the season, we were pretty high on Lowry. We were pretty high on Cheeks. We were pretty high on a lot of the guys. It's about what kind of disruption they could bring to the defense. And yeah, I agree. Leon Lowry leaving is not the end of the world, but this is the first of many. We're going to have some. Who do you not want to see enter the portal? For me, it's Vinny Anthony. Give me two guys that you're like, I really don't want them going anywhere right now.
Well, on the offensive side, it's going to be both running backs for me. I want to see Jones and Dupree stay, because if we think we're getting who we think we're getting at offensive coordinator, I think that those two guys are one heck of a 1-2 punch. I agree with Vinny. I'm not saying him simply because you already took him.
Right.
On the defensive side of the ball, I think you have to have Dylan Johnson come back. I would say I want Xavier Lucas. Like, I don't want him going anywhere. I feel like that guy has shutdown corner written all over him. And I think that if you're Wisconsin, he fits the athletic profile of your ideal for that position. Like, we saw Hallman, what the limitations were of Hallman in the last few games of the season, where teams just weren't afraid to attack him because, honestly, he hasn't made many plays. And I think part of the reason you didn't see him making many plays is because nobody threw at him a lot of the season just because they figured they'd take their chances with Fort Greene. I think that he kind of got a little, like, out of his – he wasn't as sharp as you would expect because he wasn't tested most of the season. And it showed late in the season against those last couple games where they got beat up.
We talk about how Fickell's a salesman, and this is where, I mean, obviously recruiting is a big piece of it, but keeping guys, this is really going to be where he has to, like, really show what he can do from a sales perspective, because you've got to sell a lot of these guys staying. You just mentioned Dupree, you mentioned Jones, you mentioned Lucas. Like, we talk about guys like Heiberger. We talk about, all these types of the freshman guys, Haywood. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that we don't want to go anywhere. How can Fickell sell this program? That's to me is going to be the real question, is how many enter in. Now, if we don't lose the recruits for National Signing Day, we don't lose a ton of the talent that we want to keep in the portal. That to me does. It sends yet another message that, okay, he can get the guys in, which even furthers my point of next year, you've got to have more production, because if you're able to actually keep these guys, you got to get them to do something on the field. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I agree with you on who we don't want to see. And there's a lot of people in that locker room.
Well, there's like a whole freshman class I don't want going anywhere.
Exactly. Don't want the freshman class to go anywhere. Like, yeah, someone just put Mike Tretch needs to stay. Yeah. I mean, Tretch is a
Haywood.
guy that would be Tretch, Haywood. I mean, there's so many of them out
there.
Mandel,
I don't want going anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, Corey, I think, has a chance to be a huge center. Like, for them, I don't know if that's where he's going to eventually stick. But even if he's not that, he's an elite athletic guard for this scheme. People with Heiberger and Allegro. One of the things I will say, somebody brought this up regarding the go-go offense. I will tell you that the running scheme that's built into the go-go offense has been working for 80 years against everybody. People need to stop acting like this isn't going to play in the Big Ten. It's built on deception. It's built on getting guys out of it. It's what Kansas ran again in the Big 12 and just gutted people with. And it's what Penn State is doing right now and is one of the top 3 teams in the Big Ten. Stop acting like this offense isn't going to work. I've heard so many people saying it's gimmicky. It's not gimmicky at all. It's actually a really viable scheme, and it's really a scheme that's built to not need top shelf athletes in order to be effective.
I mean, that's obviously how he was successful. We'll get into Marion. We're going to talk about that in our next segment. But yeah, there's a lot to go on there. This is something that I wanted to put up, which I thought was interesting. Dark Ray says, Tretch is a fraud. He was overhyped. I could not disagree with this take more, Dark Ray. No, I don't think he was overhyped at all. I think he really is that good. I think he had an absolute crap performance from his quarterback, which does make a difference.
I also think that he just wasn't given the playing time that he probably deserved. Like, he's one of the few guys that was a playmaker. He did positive things every time he was on the field.
And when he was in there, he did do positive things. And listen, at the end of the day, it's still his first year really getting playing time. I'm fully a believer in Tretch still, and I think and Bo Dragon agrees. Tretch is totally overhyped. No, I mean just my opinion. I don't think that's the case at all. Anything, Justin? Any other last thoughts on the Minnesota game? The Axe being lost, like just a disaster. Anything else you want to get off your chest about Minnesota before we talk about the coordinators and the?
Well, I hate Minnesota. You know that they're the program I hate more than any other, and a lot of it has to do with their coach. Like I have zero respect for PJ Fleck. I just think that he's such a kind of a douchebag as a coach.
I mean, you're not wrong.
And when I look at it, it's like I hate his persona. I hate everything he kind of tries. Like it seems so fake to me. What I will say is I think that a game like that has value because it is a rivalry game. That is going to hold more weight in terms of how a coach looks at himself and looks at his program than anything else. And it is kind of one of those things that I think when the way the fan base looks at it, like you lost to Minnesota, that is something that can be a catalyst for change. That to me is a very positive thing in terms of this is unacceptable. This is not something that we're going to allow stand, because you don't get a lot of these situations. And it's the same thing's happening at Ohio State now. Ryan Day loses for the fourth straight time. And even though his team is 10-2, there are people that want him fired because you're losing to the one team that matters most to them, even more so than winning a national title. It's kind of the same way at Wisconsin. There are teams that we do not accept losing to. We would probably be more accepting of an 11-1 record if that one loss was Minnesota, but I still will be extremely upset if the one team we choose to lose to is a team that acts like a smug prick every time you lose to them. Yeah.
I literally cannot believe that Ohio State lost that game, by the way. I wasn't watching.
That should have been a 2-touchdown game.
I was on the golf course. Holy crap. It's unbelievable. I mean, Ryan Day and you know what? We were worried about if Ryan Day loses to them, Fickell's not going anywhere because they're not calling him at all. That's yikes. Yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously there's probably Minnesota fans listening to this right now. Kudos. Fine. Congratulations. You got the axe. It's off the back of my wall, and it will be until next year because hopefully we're going to get it back soon. But just a total disaster, honestly, losing a game like that in the fashion that we did, and seeing Minnesota have what turns out to be a fairly decent season on our home field. And, with that, chopping that axe is really quite depressing. But it's one of those things that it wasn't fully unexpected. Honestly, it's just we looked so bad the last half of the year, and it really, especially in our rivalry games, like what are we doing in the Nebraska game? What are we doing in the Minnesota game? Iowa, just a disaster all across the board. Losing 5 straight is one of the things that I'm even more disappointed with. Like, whenever we did our confidence ratings, we were talking about the Nebraska game and the Minnesota game. It was all just junk, and there was nothing that we could do about it. A lot of talk, Justin, about the offensive coordinator.
Can I throw one more thing out here real quick?
Please.
Fleck had his team ready, outcoached. I don't think they outcoached anything in this game. I think his team was just far more ready to play. Like they were the more physical team in this game, which was a massive part of it. And that has been a failure that we've seen kind of down the stretch. This team just doesn't seem engaged. And that's like you saw the type of way they played against Penn State and have played against Oregon. If that team shows up, they're fine. It had nothing to do with like massive, like strategic things that Minnesota was doing. They were just executing what they wanted to do, which was effectively run it down our throat. We just seemed disinterested in coming to play.
I disagree. I think he absolutely was outcoached. I mean, I think we've been outcoached all season. I think every single time, I feel like multiple times throughout the year, we look like we don't have a game plan that can stop the other team, and the other team can do whatever they want against us. And it's execution. You're right about that, but I'm not saying it just, I do think we were outcoached quite a bit this year, including against Minnesota. I mean, Fleck had a plan and they executed it flawlessly, and we really didn't have. It's not like we came there thinking, okay, Minnesota has.
I don't think they did anything that we weren't expecting, though. It wasn't like they did anything that was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. That was a really impressive thing. They did the same thing they've been doing all season. We did a bad job of actually stopping anything.
They just
it's part of the reason that our defense has been bad all season. It's like it's a scheme that just doesn't do anything that helps with what we need. Like, I would have been happy if we just sold out against the run and just been like, all right, if you're going to beat us through the air, then beat us through the air. I don't care, but we're not going to let you get 150 yards rushing against us.
Bo Dragon says, Rajeev, did Fleck take your little axe? It's in the closet right over here. I almost broke
away
it.
From you should get a trophy case, like a mini trophy case made for it, and then it goes on display when we have the axe, and when it's not, you have to put it away.
I mean, that's just not up there anymore. It was originally Ryan's idea. Ryan actually started this. So yeah, I had it up there for a while. It was right where my thumb is pointing, but it's not there anymore. It's gone. It will be back if we are the axe holders. Because that's, yikes. All right, so let's talk about offensive coordinator a little bit. A lot of talk about this, a lot of speculation about Brendan Marion, coach currently offensive coordinator at UNLV. Their season is not over yet, so we'll see how that goes.
This hasn't been confirmed, by the way, but there's some smoke.
There's some smoke, but there's not. That's what it is right now. Mm-hmm. Cody Schmidt says, how confident that Fickell goes with Marion or Craddock, or is he just going to go with what he knows in Geno? So that's kind of the ultimate question, right? Is obviously Brendan Marion go offense. If you haven't watched it, there's plenty of stuff on YouTube about his offense, kind of how it originated at Howard University and through kind of his career. He played at Tulsa, was a wide receiver. He developed this offense through different schemes that he saw from Gus Malzahn and other things. Plays generally two running backs in an interesting formation next to each other, and then it can be a split back if he wants. Overloads one side. It's about confusion. It's about forcing the defense to react in a certain way, and then allowing you to, with not necessarily as much talent as you correctly stated earlier, to be able to win against teams that are better than you, which in concept is good. There was another point, and you kind of brought this up, Jason Geldon said, explain to me how the go-go offense is supposed to work against traditional Big Ten defenses. I think it can work against any defense. I really do believe that.
It has a lot of eye candy, but you still have to execute.
Right. Ultimately, it's execution, because there's a ton of offenses out there that actually can work in the Big Ten and that can work everywhere. No one thought that the RPO is really going to stick around for a long time, and it's here to stay forever. And there's so many things that I think it can work. The question is, can we have the players? And that's the thing. And then I wanted to get this comment out here. Mark F asked, what quality coordinator would want to hitch their future to Fickell, given he's on the hot seat? Do you think this plays into anything, Justin?
I don't think so, because I think right now, if you're Mac, you have to give him time to let him do it, because if this goes up in flames, you're probably gone too. Like if he bottoms out next year and goes like 2-10, Mac is probably getting let go too. I don't know that for sure, and maybe they look at a more big scale version of Wisconsin and say, well, we're doing well in these other sports, so we're going to let it slide. But the way I look at it is, this is kind of like, this is the financial driver of the entire athletic department. And if you flub this, they're probably going to get you. You're probably going. They're not going to let this just continue the way it is, because they can't afford the financial implications of what will happen if the team truly bottoms out. Whereas Nebraska has like a license to print money, because it's the only team really in their state, and they have a very, very loyal fan base. Wisconsin doesn't have that luxury. If this team bottoms out, they're in dire straits from a financial standpoint.
We're also the only team in our state too, so let's not. I mean,
we are, but we have the Packers are the team that people will stand behind and be loyal to. Fans with Wisconsin are a little more wishy-washy. We're diehards. There's a lot of people out there that can take or leave Wisconsin that are a little bit more fair weather. Like, if the team's not good, they won't show up.
Akepo says they took his little axe. Well, a funny story about this. My neighbor, he and his wife is from Minnesota and is a bit of a Gophers fan, and actually wanted to, on the show, while the show was on,
come and take it from you,
take the axe. And
absolutely
I was like, no, not gonna happen. Just not. Caitlin, if you're listening, not gonna happen. But it's gone, never to be seen until next year. Yeah, yikes, that would have been bad. So Justin, do you think we get Marion? I mean, honestly, do you think at this point, like you feel like, do you want him, and do you think we get him?
I absolutely want him. Number one of the biggest aspects of him that I think is necessary and why I appreciate him. I like the scheme. I like his philosophy as a coach more than anything, and it's something that I feel like Wisconsin badly needs right now. His philosophy as a coach is the reason why it's called the go-go is that you sell out for your teammates. How hard you play on a given play is how much you care about your teammates.
When you don't have the ball specifically.
Yes. So when he's talking about wide receivers blocking or whatever, when you use that type of logic on players and somebody mails it in on a play and it's responsible for a miss, and you get to say your effort on that play shows that you don't give a crap about your brothers out there. Like that weighs a lot. And that's a mindset that you can kind of build into your guys. Nobody wants to be embarrassed and be the guy who looks like they don't give a crap. And that's what I feel like we badly need on our offensive side of the football and defensive side of the football right now. Like, if I don't do what I'm responsible for, then this play not working is on me. I feel like a potentially powerful thing, even though that's kind of always what you're doing. But when you're going to kind of belittle people and be like, you're not getting the job done and you're responsible for why this didn't work, that is a powerful motivator, I feel like, in my opinion, in terms of the way it can work. It creates a culture that you want on that side of the ball.
I also want Marion. I think that his offense, to be fair, I was a little skeptical at first too, just because sometimes you see these offenses that appear gimmicky. But once I actually did more research on his offense and watch more videos and watch some things and breakdowns and film, it absolutely could work in the Big Ten. And it's still premised of a power running game. That's still the premise of the offense. Yeah. So, and that's what we have, right? We've always been a power running team. We can do that. And obviously it's misdirection. It's confusion of the defense. Ultimately though, Justin, there's one thing we need, and it's a quarterback. Yeah. So regardless of what happens with Marion, it's about the quarterback, whether now the guy at UNLV is obviously, I think he's a senior now. This Williams guy.
Yeah. He's not bringing somebody with him from there.
Right.
Like their entire quarterback room is.
But it's about, can they actually get a guy to be that quarterback? And if you don't have the quarterback, it doesn't work. So that's really the primary objective at this point. Because let's say you get Marion, and there was a question here earlier about, well, if Marion's system doesn't work, if Marion is the guy and the system doesn't work at Wisconsin, Fickell's gone. So Fickell has to find a way to get a quarterback in this offseason. Clearly, Mabry wasn't the guy or isn't the guy. I'm surprised we didn't see him at the end of the season. I think you were a bit surprised by that too. Not sure why we didn't, but I'm guessing he's probably going to leave. It wouldn't surprise me if someone came out here and said that he's entered the transfer portal at this point. It all falls on the quarterback, and that's something that I'm not really sure if we're going to get it. I don't know if it's going to be a good one. I hope we can get a solid quarterback in, but if that's not here, nothing.
I will say is viewed as a very good recruiter.
Yes.
So he's somebody that I do trust in that regard. And I do think one of the luxuries you have with somebody who's at that level, they have to be very good at evaluating, because they're kind of, you have nothing, your resources stink. So effectively you're looking for things that you can make work. And I think some of that ability to kind of think outside the box and find value in things that maybe other people don't see is a strength that is a positive thing to bring in from a smaller level. Whereas somebody who's been at a program with a lot of resources, they may struggle to flip the switch and go the other way and be like, I don't have that anymore. I need to be able to figure out what I can do when you had the luxury before.
Zach Bart says, enough smoke with Marion to constitute a fire. I love his offense and philosophy. He's a culture guy. Players love him, preaches effort. He feels like everything we need right now on offense. Hire him ASAP. Yeah, I mean, Zach, I think this kind of sums it up. I think this is where a lot of Badger fans are right now. There are other couple guys that are being talked about. The guy from Tulane, Joe Craddock, I believe is his name.
He's expected to go to Michigan, I believe. Bruce Feldman's kind of hinted at that.
Florida State made a hire, which is big in this world because that Florida State was considered one of the top options for Marion. So they've hired Gus Malzahn. And that's perfectly fine because that frees up Marion to hopefully come to Wisconsin. So that hopefully will drop in the next list. So they've got a game on Friday. Boise State and UNLV play in a championship game on Friday. That'll be a big in determining which ones can go to the playoffs. So big deal there. And I imagine if it's going to be Marion, it'll be announced after. There has been some rumors that have come out. There are various people that says, he's the guy. There's been some conflicting reports. Like right now, we just got to wait and see. Who knows what's going to happen. But if he is the guy, that's it. And I'm on record as saying I don't really feel like we need to make a switch at the defensive coordinator at the present time. Justin, I feel like you're ready for a new DC right now. Like it's time for a new defensive coordinator.
I can't watch another year of this defense because my biggest fear is that if we get a competent offense, it's going to cost us, and it's going to be one of those things where when we play big games, we're going to watch teams just adjust in the second half and just kind of basically just execute down our throats because we can't ever force their hand. Like the second half of that Penn State game killed me because I watched it and I'm like, yes, a part of it was they swapped quarterbacks. Part of it was also we just had nothing we could do to like put them into negative situations. And guys were playing hard in that game, but there was just, you're not getting sacks. You're not getting tackles for loss. You're constantly getting into third and 6 territory. And that puts so much pressure on a defense to be able to make a play and stop them. And you can't do that again and again and again and expect them to not eventually wilt. And that's what happened in that game. Penn State just was capable of being like, all right, 3rd and 4, we can make that work. You get him in 3rd and 10, and it's a lot tougher.
I mean, I do think that like he did. There was some blitzing. There was some creativity from him as the season progressed a little bit, more so than on the offensive side of the ball, where there was virtually no creativity anywhere. Yeah. So if Tressel is our defensive coordinator next year, I'm not going to be that upset about it. I'm okay with it as long as because we do have more recruits coming in that we're excited about. And like, as you mentioned earlier, people, like the best players being on the field. If that happens, I do think he can be somewhat successful. I'm not saying I'm super high on him. It wouldn't be a catastrophe if he was the guy. Obviously, we know the offensive coordinator changed, so there should be some improvement, either way. But I'm still not totally out on Tressel. But the effort has to be there. And that's where I was saying earlier how Fickell needs to really get involved in that defense. He has to be a bigger part of it. And I'm assuming he will. Given the performances that we've had this year and given the results that we've had, he has no choice but to be more involved and to make that defense better than it was.
Somebody mentioned FCS players being good and going forward. One of my big takeaways that I will say is I do not want mercenaries on this team. I'm totally okay with a guy moving up because he's looking for an opportunity to showcase himself for the NFL. I am not okay with getting somebody who's looking for a payday because I think that we're kind of seeing from a culture standpoint how that negatively impacts your team. There were some guys that were chasing money, and I just don't want those guys. If that's the attitude they're coming in with, how much you can pay me, they get them out. Like I just don't want anything to do with that mindset because I think that creates a toxic environment within your team when you have guys that's their focus.
Jason Geldon asks, if this Marion guy's the real deal and comes to UW as the OC and has success, wouldn't he just leave in 2 to 3 years for a head coaching job? Yeah, and that's okay. Because that also means in that 2 to 3 years, things went really right
well
for us.
for us.
You don't see Bill Longo going to a head coaching job because it didn't work. I'm perfectly okay with that. I mean, if you remember back in the Dave Aranda days, that's fine. That's it. When you have a good coordinator, that just means you're really successful, and that's perfecly fine for me.
Look at the top teams in the country. They're constantly turning over coordinators because those guys move up. Right. And that's fine. You've got to be a shrewd coach and kind of have your guys that you're kind of keeping an eye on that you think are the next guy up. And maybe you have somebody internally that learns from that person that takes over. Like there's a lot of options now, especially with the coaching trees. Like Wisconsin can effectively have as many coaches as they want. They just can only send 9 out to recruit. I think if you are Fickell and you get somebody that's a high-level coordinator, like if Marion comes here and is really good, you're an idiot if you don't have somebody that's kind of underneath him, learning from him, that's ready to take over. Like that's a cheap way to find somebody who's capable of taking that job on, who probably isn't going to have a ton of, people looking at him and looking at potentially trying to steal him away when you're not showing it. The offensive coordinator is always going to have that. If you have somebody that's an understudy that's kind of learning from them, they're not going to have a very public reputation at that point that you're going to have to worry about them.
Yeah. Perfectly fine if he leaves. We'll end the show with a few more questions here. If you have any other questions that you want us to hit on or topics you want us to talk about, put it in the chat. Mike78 asks, Justin, is there a chance that Smith can play as a freshman? We've talked a lot about quarterback. We've talked a lot about issues that we're having there. I think we obviously need a transfer. Do you see any way that Carter Smith plays?
I don't. I think he's got some learning to do. I do think that if Marion is the guy, that his scheme is a perfect fit for Smith. There's a lot in this offense that is reads by the quarterback in terms of what it is. And what I'll say is part of the beauty of this offense is you go into a given play, you may have 3 options that you can run out of that particular play. And that's what I said, like offensive line blocking, they said there's like 4 different ways the offensive line blocks in this scheme. It's not a lot, but you have so many variations of what's actually coming out of it that's really hard for the defense to be able to key on what exactly you're doing on a given play. That relies on the quarterback to be the guy to read that correctly based off what he sees from the defense and make the correct play.
Got to be heady.
That's going to take time for Smith to be able to understand that and play it. It's going to take a time for anybody, but you don't want him also learning, this is my footwork, this is everything else when you're going into that. You want somebody who's really competent in reading defenses. He's a high school quarterback that's going to be coming in, and what he's seen at the high school level isn't remotely close to what he'll see at the college level, just like it's not remotely close to what a college quarterback's going to see when they go to the NFL. It's different standards going all the way up. There are very few guys who come in and are able to do that from year one.
Dark Ray asks, do we lose the 3 quarterbacks to the portal that Longo recruited?
I probably.
Yeah.
If Marion's the guy, none of them are fit except for Mabry.
Obviously Mabry's the interesting one. Look, Landon Locke is not. That's not going to be a surprise at this point. That's whatever. But I think that Mabry is the real interesting discussion. Does he fit into a Marion offense on paper? Yeah, I think he does. He's mobile. He can move a little bit. He's a smart guy. He's got a strong arm. But then again, it begs the question, why didn't we see him at all this year, given the horrific performances that we saw from Braden Locke? So what has Fickell seen in him? What did Longo see? But it doesn't really matter what Longo thought because Longo's gone. But that's really the thing is, will Mabry actually stay? I ultimately think he does stay. I think Mabry is going to stick around.
If he did.
Because here's the thing. He's going to always go somewhere. It's not like, he's going to have his red shirt. He has his red shirt available. He's going to be a redshirt freshman next year. If he's not happy next year, he can always move on. There's no reason to not stick around to see what the hot new Brendan Marion offense, if that's who we go with, brings in. Does he have a place? If he doesn't, he moves on. I don't really think that there's a reason for him to go anywhere right now, given he hasn't put anything on film. There's not really going to be a ton of activity out there for him. I'm sure people will take him, but why not just stay and find out where he is and what he can do, right? I don't see Mabry leaving right now, unless you do. But
I have heard things going in both directions, so it's really hard to say. I've heard the family really loves Madison. I've heard people say that his teammates are saying that he's going to follow Longo wherever he goes. Until it's in the portal, I have no idea what to expect. And who knows? Maybe Fickell will be like, hey, you're a really good fit for this offense. If this is what's incoming, you might have a lot of opportunity to really showcase yourself here.
I agree. Just an epic disaster. Justin, let's close the show there. We're numb, feeling apathetic. The season's over. There's no bowl game. Sounds like there's not going to be a bowl game, even if we do have
they're already out for sure. They're 100% out. What I will say with this may be a blessing in disguise, given that there is so much upheaval potentially with the portal. Wisconsin has an opportunity to now focus on maintaining the guys they want to keep on their roster and really focus on that rather than worrying about a bowl game. Yes, you probably would have benefited from the practices, but it also would have been pulling the attention of the coaches away from potentially what players are thinking and what's going on off the field. Now you can focus on making sure your guys that you have to have and want to keep, that you can effectively re-recruit them. in this offseason and maintain your roster.
Yeah, I am perfectly okay with not seeing a bowl game. I have no interest in watching this team play another football game this year because all it's going to do is make me more upset, make me want to come on here and moan and complain and talk about how awful we are. So I'm perfectly fine with that. And a great comment here from our friend Kevin. Thank God it's basketball season because, we're 8-0.
Do not have a late season swoon. I cannot handle that after this.
I mean, Justin, you just got to be more positive, man. You just got
I
to
will
think
be
that we're not
positive
going
when
to
he
have a
proves
late
to me that it's
season
not going to happen. If we finish strong, I will give him all the props in the world. That's what people are giving me a hard time about, not like buying all in. It's like I bought all in last year and I got repaid for it by us losing or going 3-8 to finish. Like at this point, I'm just going to sit back and I won't say one thing or one way or the other. I'm very happy with how the season started.
What I really hate to see is when teams run all over us, and now my pro team is doing the same thing. The Patriots are running all over the Colts right now. It's driving me crazy. Anyway, look, I think there's got to be some positivity going into basketball for sure. Dave Valensky asks, what is your expectations for next year? Your schedule is going to be tough, the toughest in the Big Ten. I can easily see 3-9.
Let me just say this. Nobody expected Indiana to be 11-1 now. We'll see what the schedule looks like when it plays out. Like there's a lot of variation that could happen in this offseason. There's a lot that could happen with some of these teams that we're worried about in terms of the portal themselves. Like who knows how toxic some of these teams were and whether people are going to be sticking around. It's going to be really interesting to see what things look like next year. And one thing I will say is Oregon and Ohio State are going to be wagons. They're going to be a problem for us.
I mean, our schedule is horrific. Let's just be honest about that. But again, to me, I think we could absolutely be a 6-6 team again next year on a good side. On a 7-5, who knows? Unlikely.
We need to look a far more disciplined and effective team.
It's just about it's about how we play. It's not really going to be about the record. It's of course always about the record. I'm not trying to say the record doesn't matter. It does. But how we perform is going to go a long way in deciding whether in 2026, when we have a favorable schedule, whether that can be a team that we really get excited about and get behind, or are we talking about the end of the Fickell era and 2026 is the start of who knows, right? That's really where this goes. The point being, it's an inflection point for this program. This offseason is going to be super critical. Who we hired OC? Do we make a change at DC? Do we keep our 2025 recruiting class? Do we lose people in the transfer portal? Who do we get in the transfer portal? And can we get a quarterback? A lot of questions to be answered. Lot of areas for discussion for the Bucky Report for several weeks to come. Justin, final thoughts before we close the show.
It's been a rough season. Let's move forward and hopefully things go back. And JB, stop with that nonsense. JB putting up Justin hates Josh Gasser. He's one of my favorite players. Shush.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm going to go watch my Colts hopefully not lose to the Patriots. We're down 16-14 up. I can't have any more bad things happen this weekend. This is not going to be it for me. Yes, bad season. We will do a bit more of a football review. You can't really talk about MVP of the season, but we'll talk about most disappointing player. We'll talk about some things. We'll kind of do a full thing. I will do some stats showing the snap counts for the whole season for defense, and we'll go through some of those things in the upcoming weeks. There's a lot of time, sadly, to break down this season. The axe is gone. The winning season is gone. The bowl streak is gone. And now we just have to hope that the future is a bit brighter for this football program. Thank you very much for joining us on a Sunday early morning episode of the Bucky Report. If you're still listening, hit that like button. It helps out the show a lot. Subscribe if you haven't already so you know when we make new content. Justin, we will talk again next week, as always, on Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy the show, subscribe to our YouTube channel at The Bucky Report or The Bucky Report Podcast from wherever you get your content. Until next time, on Wisconsin.